Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about old programmers. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hey Frederick, what happens to older programmers, like people who are over 30? Do they get fired as they get older and less innovative? Or does mid-career pay increase much for a software engineer? Okay, so it's a two question thing here. Right. So let's talk about the age thing first and foremost. Well, when you have such a distinguished age, such as myself, when you're past 30, you do not get fired, I can tell you. You are actually pretty much in the sweet spot for most of the IT world because when you're just past 30, you're just old enough to be taken seriously by the people who are in their 40s or late 30s who actually have real influence, and the 20 somethings, they still look at you as someone worth talking to because they haven't really learned anything about how to work at that point. They think some of them think they do. The late 20 somethings are the most annoying because they are just getting into that phase where they think they know how things work, but for some reason it's very rare that it turns out their way. You should ask me a question about what my feelings are about late 20 something middle managers who are on their first job and have read a few books on leadership. These people are really fun to deal with. But the thing is, I've seen this pattern continuously coming back where people seem to believe that there is such a thing as a magical age where you become redundant or you're going to get fired as a software developer. And I'm telling you that that is not the case. In certain companies, you might have a problem with the age thing. In trendy startups and so forth, they might be a little bit more enthusiastic about hiring someone who's fairly junior or in terms of age. But the end thing always comes back and bites everybody if that's all you care about. And that is that the 20 something they don't know how to create success. Most of them have no idea of how to, like, if you're 20 something something, unless you started coding when you were 12, odds are that you will not have the experience necessarily, at the very least, to make a success of your project. That doesn't I mean, you can, of course. It's just that you don't lose that ability just because you turn 30 or 40 or 50 or whatever. You still have that ability. The only thing that really matters is whether or not you can produce the results. Do you know how to do all the things that you need to do? That's the thing that matters. And so I am curious to know, like, there is absolutely, I'm not going to lie about it, there is an age preference, let's call it that, or an age, I don't know, age prejudice, for sure, when you get to an age where you're kind of closer to retirement. But that doesn't exclude you from being applicable for a lot of positions. The thing that usually happens, though, is that there is a lifespan to your career. And what I mean by a lifespan is that you may not be able to think in those terms because clearly you are under 30, I'm guessing. But your responsibility as a software developer will evolve as you get older. It's going to have to evolve in many cases in order for you to stay relevant, and that is true for everything you do. It's the nature of your job, where you start out as this rookie newbie programmer who doesn't really know how to do anything, and then you get trained by the old people and they get you to a point where you sort of know what you're doing, and then they pay you to just do that thing, and you can stay there forever basically, or as I'd like to say, you can take the factory workers career path or career strategy, which is that you just do that one thing until you hit either one or two things happens. Either you get so old that you can retire because nothing really changes, and you have to stay usually in the same company, or you get fired or something like that happens where you lose and you realize that you've lost all your market value because you haven't been thinking about how you're going to deal with the situation when you don't actually have the same market value. Because if you know how to do the same thing as the 20 or something, then most companies won't really see a reason to hire you. But when you're hiring somebody who is in their 30s or their 40s, you're hiring them because they know more than the 20 somethings. And most of them will. Practically all of the 30 somethings are going to know more than 20 somethings about the industry, and they will have more to bring. They will be able, in many cases, to lead a team. They will be able to produce architectures and solutions that the 20 somethings cannot. That's the whole point. Like that's experience. It's not that hard. At least from my perspective, this is so obvious that it's almost painful. The As I said, the only time this is not true is if you have completely neglected your own development. And there are absolutely people who are doing that. As I said, the factory workers' career strategy does actually, there are developers who are following that pattern. And that's on them. Like, there are pros with doing that as well, because you don't have to continuously develop yourself, which leaves more time for leisure and other things. But it is a very real risk that you should be aware of, that you might become replaced, or you might not. You might lose your market value. So what I want you to take away from this is that a software developer who is over 30 does not get fired for being over 30. Usually the sweet spot for a team lead or a senior developer or someone with more experience is usually around the early 30s to mid 30s, thereabouts. And the older you get, usually the higher the expectations are going to be on your development. There will absolutely come a day when you get to be, say, closer to 50, 60, like up towards the retirement ages, where your market value will start to rise. And if you want to keep yourself relevant at that age, you basically have to be in a position where you practically know how to run the show. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to find a job necessarily. I have friends who are in the retirement age who they struggled a little bit, but it wasn't really impossible for them to get another occupation or to get another job. But for sure, there is an age discrimination going on, but that's not unique to the IT industry in any way. And then the second thing was, does mid-career pay increase much for a software engineer? That's completely dependent on region, and it's also completely dependent on how much you progress. It's the same thing. If you just write code, you won't see much of an increase in your payment when you get to the middle of your career. But if you are the sort of person who can bring a lot of value, and that's the key takeaway here, age is less of a factor. Value is what matters. And usually people associate an older person with someone who can bring more value. If you can't do that, you're not going to impress anybody, and you're not going to get paid as much as someone who can really make the difference. Have a great day.